It was the worst natural disaster in recorded history, a devastating tsunami that killed hundreds of thousands of people. 10 years later, we ask, what have we learned? And could new warning systems help save lives in the future? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. Thousands of people gathered across Asia this Friday to mark the 10th anniversary of the 2004 tsunami. On December 26, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake generated a tsunami that swept across the Indian Ocean within a matter of hours, with waves reaching over 30 meters and destroying anything and everything in its path. Over 250,000 people were killed and hundreds of thousands more were displaced. Now, 10 years later, is the region ready for the next big disaster? Stef Vassen sent this report from Banda Aceh in Indonesia.
Survivors in Aceh gather in prayer. In the Indonesian province hardest hit by the tsunami, nearly 170,000 victims are remembered. Irawati lost 2 children and her mother.
Our thoughts about our family stay with us forever. I was head of a school then, and of our 300 students, only 70 survived.
In Sri Lanka, the memorial starts in a train, symbolizing the accident 10 years ago, when carriages were derailed by the tsunami. Udara Sugandi was on board, together with her brother and uncle who died.
The water was up to my neck when I got out of the carriage through a window. I was swept away by a huge wave, but there was an old man who grabbed me and we floated on a window frame.
In Thailand, embassies organize memorials for foreign tourists who perished in the disaster. In the fishing village of Ban Nam Kem, 1,400 people were remembered, mostly migrant workers from Myanmar. People across the region united by those horrifying moments a decade ago.
To many it feels like it just has happened yesterday. Although Aceh has moved on, the pain remains. In 10 years the Indonesian province has been resurrected remarkably, but the fear remains that Aceh is unprepared if another disaster strikes.
Although the government believes lessons have been learned.
A disaster can be overcome by changing the culture. I think after the tsunami many have learned, so there will be less victims next time. They know they have to run away or go to higher grounds. What we still need to improve is earthquake-prone housing.
While still in pain and grief, Aceh also thanked the world for its generosity. More than $7 billion was donated. Money used to turn the war and disaster-stricken province into a better place to start a new life. Stef Vassen, Al Jazeera, Banda Aceh.
Well, we'll talk to 2 guests about the lessons learned from all of this in just a moment. But first, let's speak to one of the tsunami survivors. Agus Firman lost his parents and 2 brothers in the disaster. He joins us from Banda Aceh. Thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us on what must be a very difficult day for you and so many others today. I want to ask you, first of all, if you can recount the events of that day and how it all unfolded, how it happened.
Okay, first on Friday I was coming back to my hometown because before that I was in school that was far away from my hometown, and then on Saturday, Monday I was at home, and then on Sunday I have to go back to the school which is far away from my house. So in the morning that was okay, nothing happens. So when I was in the bus on my way back, there was a strong earthquake happened, and then at the moment I think everything was okay. Even I laughed at the moment because I thought just fine. But then after about 10 more minutes in our journey, I was in the hill at the moment, and there was landslide on the hill, so the bus cannot pass, only motorcycles that could pass there. But some people who have met there, who have already passed the road, they suddenly came back and then scream like the water comes out. The water just comes up, because at the moment we have no idea what tsunami was. So after that, I felt it's weird, because that impossible such a thing would happen. But like it or not, and then the driver turned around the buses to check it up whether it was true or not, and then we saw the closest village from our way back then, and then the village was gone.
Yeah, well, just describe that for us if you can. What did it look like when you arrived at the village?
Was totally destructed, nothing left.
Our reporter Step Vassen made the point that 10 years might seem like a long time, but to many of the survivors, the events of that day are still very clear in their minds, that it seems like it could have been yesterday. Is that how it seems for you?
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Sometimes just, it hurts.
Yeah, I understand. Do you think
such thing? Yeah.
Do you think your town is better prepared now for another earthquake? Do you think things have improved? That more aid has come to your town since then?
Yeah, I think they are well prepared now, because learning from the past experience, that's really destructive. So I think if tsunami comes again, I think they know how to handle it. And as far as we're concerned, that we also have such an escape building. So when something bad happens, probably people can run there.
Well, we appreciate very much you taking the time to speak with us about this. Agus Firman speaking to us there from Banda Aceh. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Never before has a tsunami caused so much damage. It prompted the UN and 24 governments around the Indian Ocean to start work on a tsunami early warning system. The existing seismic monitoring network was upgraded and expanded, and now there are more than 140 monitors around the region and more than 100 sea level stations with devices designed to detect abnormal waves or changes in sea level. Information from all these networks is fed to national and international monitoring stations. If a tsunami occurs, these systems are supposed to send out warnings within 10 minutes to government disaster management centers, ports, coast guards, and other critical facilities like nuclear plants. Some countries, including India, are also introducing systems using mobile phone SMS messaging. These messages can target and tailor their message to specific locations depending on the risk. The United Nations says the system could save an estimated 1,000 lives a year over the next 100 years. Let's bring in two of our guests now to talk more about this. In London, Matthias Schmale, who is the senior manager of the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. And joining us from Copenhagen, we have Flemming Konradsen, professor at the University of Copenhagen School of Global Health, who was in Sri Lanka when the tsunami hit. Good to have you both with us. Flemming Konradsen, let me start with you, because you were in Sri Lanka working there at the time when this started. Just talk to us about what happened in those first days and what the response to it was.
Thank you. We were, to say the least, quite unprepared, and the accounts that we just heard minutes ago is probably quite similar to what happened in Sri Lanka. It came, as we saw it, out of nowhere, ill-prepared. So a disaster happened and unfolded in front of us, and getting information, trying to assess what had happened and the magnitude, and that was what happened the first hours, simply trying to cope with, trying to get information, trying to coordinate the very first actions on the ground. I was not on the coast. I was in Colombo, and we were clearly not hit as bad as the east coast and the southern coast of Sri Lanka, where the damage was very severe. But from a coordination perspective, simply getting information, getting feedback from the areas that had been hard hit was what was in focus the first 12 hours, 24 hours. And from there, it was trying to gather as much information as possible, mapping, getting estimates on the nature of the damage, trying to assess who were best placed to provide response. The Sri Lankan government have significant capacity, and it was, of course, also a matter of coordinating with government district officers and provincial officers. So the first was simply trying to cope mentally, trying to assess damage, trying to assess needs, gather information. But a very important point is we were simply unprepared. So early warning systems in this particular situation would, of course, have helped a great deal. Even half an hour, 1 hour in this situation would have saved a lot of lives and a lot of damage.
And in terms of the area that you work in public health, do you think a place like Sri Lanka and the region as a whole is better prepared should something like this happen again? The methods of coordination and communication and just sort of pinpointing what the most urgent need is. Do you think that's better now than it was 10 years ago?
I'm sure the Indian Ocean Tsunami was a wake-up call, and has already presented it. It's initiated a number of actions and a number of initiatives focusing on building local capacity, local resilience, early warning systems, building coordinating facilities, and so on and so forth. And so the answer to the question is yes. I think most countries will be better prepared for tsunamis, but also severe weather events in general. But to honor those many who died, we have to maintain a focus on these systems. We have to continuously build capacity, and institutions, organizations continuously have to be aware that coordination is a must. So never forgetting, in memory of all those who died, that if we don't maintain a focus on those early warning systems, maintaining those systems and the communication, it will happen again sooner or later, and we need to maintain this focus on keeping the systems running. We can still do much better, but I'm sure we are better off than we were 10 years ago.
Matthias Schmale, now at the time that this happened, there was, of course, a huge international aid response, and it certainly was very heartening to see from what I remember back then. Where did all of that money go, not just in the immediate term, but in the years since then? Has it gone towards, how much of it rather has gone towards improving the lives of people in those areas?
Actually, about 80%, speaking for the Red Cross, Red Crescent, about 80% of the resources available to us have been invested into recovery work. So about 10% went into the initial relief effort, helping people, survive, saving lives. But then in the 10 years since, 80% of the resources went into recovery work. And what has been done with these vast resources, there was unprecedented generosity, in fact, in many countries around the world, and 65% of the resources available to us came from the general public. So people in the street giving very generously. What this money has been spent on is a couple of things. One is housing. Obviously, housing was destroyed. And in the Red Cross, Red Crescent, we've helped to build about a bit more than 50,000 houses. So that was one investment. Complementing that was the rebuilding of important infrastructure, such as schools. So we helped reconstruct more than 200 schools across the countries that were affected. Similarly, health clinics, including in very remote areas, were reconstructed, about 160 of them with Red Cross, Red Crescent money. So that's one part of the story, reinvesting, rebuilding infrastructure, both for individuals as well as community-based infrastructure. The other main bit is what we call in technical terms the restoration of livelihoods. So that's basically about cash grants that we have given to individuals and households to rebuild their lives in terms of investment into schooling for their children, investment into skilling up, investment into small businesses. So it's been heartening to see a decade later that quite a number of recipients of these grants have been able to rebuild their lives by rebuilding a small business or building a small new business that they didn't have before. And then the third element I'd like to highlight in terms of what was the money spent on is investment into the future, meaning being better prepared. So quite a bit of resources have gone into training people with skills such as basic first aid, as an example. Now, you mentioned earlier the importance of warning systems. In the Red Cross, Red Crescent with other actors, we've coined the phrase early warning and early action. So the systems are a key important bit. You need to get the information about something happening and, as you said earlier, get it out to relevant people in 10 minutes. But then the next step has to happen. You need to have people in vulnerable communities who can do something with this information, who can start warning their neighbors and can start activating escape routes, getting people to move into safer areas higher up or away from the coast if it is a tsunami.
And there's always room for improvement in things like this, as I'm sure there is in this situation. What would you point to that hasn't been quite addressed as well as it could be?
Yeah, I think one issue that we constantly have to work on is coordination. It was mentioned by the colleague from Denmark. These mega disasters tend to bring out a whole host of actors, and I think a key challenge for governments and for non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, is to ensure that we complement each other's work, that we are properly coordinated. So I feel that we can continue to improve in our coordination mechanisms and structures. Another thing is that we have to invest into having the right people at the right time. What I mean by that is each disaster is different, and I think the trick to good disaster response is to have people who are hugely experienced but who are able to then design the right response for the circumstances and the specific disaster of its time. So in a nutshell, on this point, I think investment into qualified people, both volunteers at community level as well as experts who can come in and complement the first response in the front line with specific expertise and flexibility to design the right response is another important area where constant improvement is required.
Flemming, Konradsen, you mentioned that there are other areas of improvement that could be worked on. What would you say they are?
Yeah, so in addition to areas already mentioned, I would say the policies and their implementation in terms of coastal zone management. Close to half the world population are living in coastal zone areas or potential areas that are at risk not just for tsunamis but for other natural disasters. And it's important that our planning of the location of essential critical infrastructure, the way we build houses, where we locate hotels, adherence to building restrictions, protecting coastal zone by mangrove, maintaining mangrove areas in the sea, and so on and so forth. There's a lot we can do, from adherence to safe and sound building, construction and planning in the coastal area. And that will safeguard us against, or make us more resilient against, some of the natural disasters that will occur more frequently in the future. So one element is the planning, the political angle, the investments in coastal zone. But I agree with what is already being mentioned, that building institutional and human resource capacity in countries around the world, and lots of countries will be at risk for natural disasters in the future. Probably not a single country can remain untouched in the future from issues that are more related to climate change. So building resilience, building institutions and people capacity locally, regionally, at national level is a must. And as a last point, probably we also, as it was mentioned before, we have to think whenever we invest in a direct response, if our investment during response can also be seen as an element of building future livelihoods and establishing a better, more resilient system for the future, then investments will not only be of immediate relevance and let's say immediate response, but we can coordinate response into more development-oriented investments. In my field, it would be water supply, sanitation systems, health infrastructure. When so much money is invested early on, we can invest also combining an early response with a long-term future service for the communities.
Yeah, Matthias Schmale, there's been argued in much of the discussion about this that because of climate change, it is very likely that the Asian region could be hit with another natural disaster on this scale. If that does happen, do you think that there needs to be better coordination between the various countries that could be hit by this? Because Flemming Konradsen made the point there about better communication needed at the governmental level, at the political level.
A couple of thoughts on this. First of all, I think it would be a mistake to only focus on the mega disasters. As Flemming has mentioned, climate change is a reality with us and is already leading to increased frequency of natural disasters, not necessarily on a huge scale, but I think, and that's why it is important for us to learn the lessons from the big disasters in terms of investment into systems, into people, into norms and standards for the many disasters that happen as we speak. So, recently we've seen floods. I think as we speak, there are major floods in Malaysia, for example, that are maybe not headline news, but that require the same kind of lessons learned from the big disasters like the tsunami being translated into practice. Now, in terms of governmental cooperation, I agree. I think that is an area where a lot has been done, but further action can be taken. And one specific action, which sometimes is not mentioned because it's not a very attractive, immediately attractive proposition, is investment into law. So let me be concrete around this. We have learned from disasters like the tsunami that it is important that governments regulate certain standards. For example, for buildings. We know that we can save lives by having standards and norms set by governments and then monitored that allow then for more earthquake-resistant buildings to be constructed, which then save lives when a disaster happens. And obviously governments need to further cooperate when it comes to the gathering of relevant information and then sharing that information. It's clear maybe one of the key lessons from the tsunami is that several countries were affected. And we know now that if the information had been spread fairly quickly, or much quicker than it was, across the affected countries, many lives would have been saved. So that kind of coordination doesn't start when the disaster happens. It has to be prepared. So you're absolutely right in pointing out that governments, especially in Asia Pacific, because it's a very disaster-prone region, naturally disaster-prone region, but I would argue across the world, governments need to collaborate in ensuring that they have systems that are connected, that they share information, and that they have coordinated preparedness and response systems in place.
All right, and on that we are going to have to leave it. Thank you to both of our guests, Matthias Schmale in London and Flemming Konradsen in Copenhagen. Thank you both for being on Inside Story. And that's it for another show. Remember, you can find this program and many more on our website. That's aljazeera.com. And you can also post your comments about the show at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. We're also on Twitter. You can contact us there. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. I'm Hazem Sika. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.